Hey everybody, this is CtrlAble, and today I want to talk about WiseEye's Proud Nordic from the perspective of a disabled Nintendo gamer, because this is one of those games that feels really interesting to break apart. On one hand, WiseEye's Proud Nordic feels like a really strong action RPG. It has fast combat, a memorable central duo, great music, a genuine sense of adventure, and on Switch 2, it is the definitive way to play it. But on the other hand, it also sounds like a game that raises some really important questions about pacing, accessibility, re-release value, and what actually makes a game feel welcoming to different types of players. And that's what I want to dissect today. At its core, WiseEye's Proud Nordic is an enhanced version of WiseX Nordic. It brings performance upgrades, new content, new characters, quality of life improvement, and a large new area, Oland Island. And from almost everything I've seen in these impressions and reviews, the overall consensus is pretty consistent. This is a good to great game. It could be a fantastic one for the white player. The combat gets praised a lot. The relationship between Adol and Karja gets praised a lot. The music gets praised a lot. The adventure itself gets praised a lot. But the criticisms are also very consistent. A lot of people point to slow, early pacing, too many tutorials, boat travel sometimes feeling tedious, naval combat being less satisfying than land combat, and the big elephant in the room, if you already played the original, is this really worth buying again? And as someone coming at this through the lens of Nintendo gaming and disability accessibility awareness, I think those points matter a lot. Because a game does not just need to be good and fair. It actually needs to feel good to live with. The biggest strengths of WiseEye's Proud Nordic is the bond between Adol and Karja. That magical tether between them is not just a story idea, it directly shapes the gameplay. You switch between them, combine attack, defend together, and build momentum through their connection. That's good design. I always love it when a game makes this mechanic-supported story, instead of feeling like two separate things taped together. Adol is the more familiar adventurous spirit, while Karja is the real emotional anchor here. Review after review points to her as one of the strongest parts of the whole experience. Her growth, her attitude, the way she starts guarded and gradually opens up, that is the heart of the game. And honestly, that matters more than people sometimes realize. Because when a game has some pacing issues, or some repetitive systems, or some frustrating stretchers, strong characters can carry you through a lot. If players care about Adol and Karja, they're much more willing to push through slower sections to see where that bond goes next. Now let's talk about combat, because this is where WiseEye's Proud Nordics reminds people why the Wise series was such a loyal following. The combat sounds fast, energetic, and satisfying, but not completely mindless. You've got solo mode, duo mode, character switching, dodging, guarding, parries, skill usage, combo flow, and a system that asks you to actually read what combat and enemies are doing. That's a really important point. From a disabled gamer's perspective, action combat can mean very different things depending on how it's executed. Sometimes fast means chaotic and exhausting. But here, many impressions suggest that combat has enough clarity and structure that it becomes something you learn and settle in. Color-coded attacks, readable enemy tells, and rhythm between solo dodging and duo defense all sound like systems that reward understanding instead of just punishing slower reaction speed for the sake of it. That doesn't automatically make it accessible to everyone, obviously. Fast dashing games will still be harder for some players than others, but it does sound like WiseX at least wants the player to understand the rules of the fight. And I also like the detail that when you fail, the game lets you retry or reduce the difficulty. That kind of friction reduction matters a lot, especially for disabled players who may want to challenge advanced action RPG without hitting a hard wall and being told too bad. That sort of design choice tells me the game is trying to keep players engaged, not just weed them out. One thing that really stood out from the material here is that one reviewer specifically praised the text size and said it was actually comfortable to read. That might sound like a small thing to some people. It is not a small thing. Readable text is one of those accessibility basics that too many games still mess up. Tiny fonts, cluttered UI, bad contrast, menus that feel like they were designed for ants, all of that adds friction before you even get to the gameplay. So hearing that WiseEye Proud Nordics has text that is easier to read is genuinely important to me as a disabled gamer. Same thing with the comments about clear audio mixing and easier to hear voice delivery. Again, that should be something standard, but it often is not. Accessibility is not only does this game have 40 menu toggles. Sometimes accessibility is, can I read it? Can I hear it clearly? Can I tell what is happening on screen? Can I stay comfortable while playing it? And from that angle, WiseEye Proud Nordics seem to do some meaningful things right, even if it may not be marketed as a major accessibility joke. Now this is the big issue. Almost every write-up here circles back to pacing. Too much setup, too many tutorials, too much stopping and starting, a first half that can drag, a game that takes a while before it really opens up. And that matters because pacing is not just a storytelling issue, it is also an accessibility issue. For some players, especially disabled gamers, dealing with fatigue, pain, brain fog, limited energy, or concentration issues, the early hours of a game are incredibly important. If the beginning feels constantly interrupted, overloaded with tutorials, or slow to let the player actually play, that can be the difference between sticking with the game and bouncing off it completely. And that's why this part of the discussion matters to me so much. Because everything I'm reading says this game becomes rewarding, it becomes fun, it becomes engaging, it becomes addictive. But if it takes too long to get there, some players may never reach that point. That does not make the game bad, but it does make it less flexible. And flexibility matters. Sea travel is one of the most divisive parts of the game. Some people really enjoy the feeling of sailing, discovering islands, and using the ship as a mobile base. Others think it slows the whole experience down, especially early on, before movement options improve. This is one of those systems where I can see both sides immediately. On paper, settling adds scale, atmosphere, and adventure. It makes the world feel bigger. It gives discovery more meaning. It gives the game identity. But in practice, if movement is slow for too long, then what should feel adventurous can start to feel like downtime that the player did not ask for. That's especially important for players who have only limited time or stamina for gaming sessions. It's traversal feels sluggish that can wear people down fast. The good news is that Proud Nordics improves on that with faster ocean travel, traversal refinements, and some quality of life upgrades. But even with those improvements, the sea systems still don't fully match the thrill of the on-foot combat. So for the sailing, it seems more like an atmospheric success than a gameplay masterpiece. It helps define the game's identity, but it is not necessarily the passion and reason that you show up. Now let's get into the most software part of WiseEye Proud Nordics. This is clearly the definitive edition. Better performance, more content, more new characters, new EX quests, new mechanics, all DLC included, new optional modes, and additions. That all sounds great, but the new content is also in a weird spot. A lot of people seem to agree agree that Olan Island is a strong addition. Some even say it's one of the best parts of the game. It adds new lore, environmental variety, bosses, exploration, and a side story with Canoe and Asterisk. But there's also this recurring feeling that it could have been DLC rather than a full release, and the lack of cross progression or a meaningful upgrade path is hard to ignore. That's why. From a player's respect standpoint, especially for people who already supported the original, asking them to start from scratch for the best version is a big ask. And from a disabled gamer's perspective, that can be an even bigger deal. Restarting a 20 to 40 plus hour action RPG is not always a small thing. For some players, that's not just about time. That's about physical energy, mental energy, and every playing content feels worth the strength. So while I can absolutely say Proud Nordics sounds like the best version for newcomers, I also think it's fair to say returning players have every right to feel frustrated. As a Nintendo-focused creator, I want to highlight the Switch 2 version because this is one of the strongest selling points. The original Switch version was solid, but this version delivers major performance gains, 60 FPS and 120 FPS options, cleaner image quality, improved lighting, better draw distance, reduced pop-in, and a stronger overall presentation. And for an action RPG, performance is not just a tech bullet point. Performance is gameplay. Higher frame rates can make combat easier to read, react to, and play over long sessions. Cleaner image quality can reduce visual strength. Better responsiveness can make a game feel less frustrating. That stuff matters, especially in fast action games where the difference between fun challenge and overwhelming mess can come down to clarity and smooth. So for Nintendo players who skipped the original, this sounds like the version to get. One of the most interesting points in all of this is the idea that Falcom is trying to make Wise a little more like Trail. More story, more dialogue, more world building, more narrative density. And I get why that would be divisive, because part of what made Wise stand out was that it was often the leaner, more immediate, more action-forward alternative. If it becomes too verbose, too padded, too treacherily similar to other big JRPGs, it risks losing some of its identity. At the same time, a stronger story focus gave us characters like Karja, and by all accounts, she is one of the best things about the game. So I think Wise Dice Proud Nordics feels like a game at a crossroads. It has one foot in classic action-adventure momentum, and one foot in the broader, more narrative-heavy RPG ambition. And depending on your taste, that tension is either what makes it interesting or what holds it back. So after dissecting all of this, where do I land? I think Wise X Proud Nordic sounds like a game with a really strong core. The combat sounds excellent. Adel and Karja sound like a fantastic central duo. The music sounds great. The sense of adventure sounds real. And on Switch 2, it sounds like a major technical step up. From a disabled gamer's perspective, I also really appreciate the signs of readable text, clear audio, difficulty, flexibility, and the overall combat readability. Those things matter, but I never want to treat them like minor details when they can completely change someone's experience. But the concerns are also real. The early pacing sounds rough. The tutorial-heavy opening sounds like a barrier. The selling may still be hit or miss depending on the player, and the lack of a proper upgrade path for existing owners is a genuine frustration. So here's my take. If you are new to Wise X, this sounds like the version to play. If you are a Nintendo player with a Switch 2, this is a compelling action RPG to keep on your radar. If you already played the original though, this sounds more like a wait for a sale situation because if you truly love the game, you need to determine that is it enough to start over. That's the most honest way to put it. Wise X Proud Nordic sounds like a strong adventure, but also a slightly awkward package. Still, for the right player, it also sounds like the kind of game that can remind you why action RPG adventures are so fun in the first place. And honestly, as a disabled Nintendo gamer, I always want more games that feel like an adventure worth going on. This has been CtrlAble. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know what you think about Wise Ass Proud Nordics, whether you've played the original, and whether you think definitive editions like this should be DLC instead of full re-release. And as always, gaming should include everyone.